Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. At Communitech, we are working hard to bring you business as virtual as much as possible while also supporting our members the best we can. But before we kick things off, I would first like to take a moment to thank all of our courageous frontline workers, not only here in Communitech's home of Waterloo Region, but across Canada for everything they're doing for our community right now. So my name is Ryan Haynes. I'm the International Programs Manager at Communitech. It's my pleasure to spend the next little while with you today. I'm very excited to be joined by some excellent speakers, but before I give them a proper introduction, I have a few housekeeping items to share. So first, just a reminder that this session is being recorded. It'll be shared at a later date for companies to view or refer back to. You can find all of our AMA recordings on the Tech Talks page on our website. You may want to minimize your speaker view on the right-hand side of your screen in order to better view the slides that are being presented. I will ask that you keep your microphone on mute during today's session, and please use the chat functionality to ask any questions that you may have throughout the session. If you're interested in following up after the session to discuss, please connect with your Communitech advisor or CSM. But if you're not a Communitech member, feel free to connect with any of us on LinkedIn. And lastly, Communitech hosts an Ask Me Anything session around relevant topics every single Tuesday at 2 p.m. So here we see pandemic-proof pitching. That's the one coming up on July 7th. Again, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. Without further ado, here are the discussions that we're going to have today. So during the back half of this session, we'll have a fireside chat with Lisa Grogan, who's co-CEO at Overlap Associates, Jason Cassidy, CEO at Shiny Docs, and Ben Sainsbury, CEO at Marion Surgical. So that discussion will be framed by the question, why the UK? All three panelists have chosen the UK market for various reasons. Their collective rationales for choosing the UK and experiences of setting up in the UK, they're sure to give you a well-rounded view of the approaches to expansion in the market, and they may be able to get into a bit of the what they don't tell you territory. So keep an eye out for that as they share some advice and workarounds that they've each had to use. But right now I'd like to introduce our first three speakers. So we have Raymond Inone, Raymond Inone, who is the investment officer with the UK Department for International Trade, otherwise known as the DIT. He'll be speaking about the business expansion into the UK and how the DIT can support your company on this journey. We also have Michael Barton, who's the Regional Director of Trade and Investment with Northern Ireland. Michael will be speaking about what Northern Ireland has to offer. And then we have Azar Janjua, who's Head of Communitech Outposts at Communitech. Azar will be speaking about how Outposts, a new employer of record service for Canadian companies created by Communitech, removes barriers to entry into the UK market. With that, let's kick things off with our first speaker, Mr. Raymond Inone with the DIT. I will throw the slides up now, and over to you, Raymond.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Ryan, for that great introduction. So first, I'm going to be talking about business expansion in the UK, and I'm going to be highlighting the opportunities in the tech sector in the UK. Next slide, Ryan, please. Yeah, so just to give you a snapshot of the UK tech sector, so 26 out of 69 European unicorns are based in the UK, and we've seen over the past couple of years that more investment is coming into the UK compared to other countries such as France, Germany, and the Netherlands. And in 2018, 184 billion pounds was generated in terms of tech revenues in the UK, which was pretty impressive. And just to give you an idea of how much money tech startups were able to raise in 2019, they raised over $10.1 billion, which is pretty much impressive. And I'm just going to highlight two companies that raised Series A investments in 2019. Checkout.com, they raised $230 million, and Green Seal, which raised a lot of funding, $655 million, and an additional $800 million Next slide, Ryan, please. So apart from tech, the opportunities in other industries, and I'm just going to highlight high potential opportunities in other industries. So in terms of space and satellites, there is the Leicestershire Space and Satellites ecosystem. There are also opportunities for businesses in photonics and microelectronics in the southwest of England. And if you are a sustainable packaging business, there are lots of opportunities for you in the Greater Manchester region. And if you're involved in life sciences, there's opportunities for your business in Leeds. And there's also opportunities in 5G and Industry 4.0 in Worcestershire. If you're in the chemicals industry, the opportunities in the Humber. If you're in the immersive technology business, there are opportunities in the Northeast. If you're a video gaming business, there are opportunities in Coventry and Warwickshire. And recently, there have been some reports in the media that Tesla is planning to, set up a gigafactory in the UK. But that hasn't been confirmed yet. So we're still waiting to see what would happen. But if that happens, that would be very huge in terms of, the electric vehicle ecosystem in the UK. So it'll be an opportunity for, startups to be part of that, supply chain. And if you're a startup in the renewable energy business, there are lots of opportunities for you in Scotland. They have a great ecosystem there. And if you're a company involved in the aerospace supply chain, there are lots of opportunities in Northern Ireland. My colleague Marco Barton is going to talk a little bit about, the opportunities in Belfast and the entire Northern Ireland. And in cybersecurity, there are lots of opportunities in Wales. So, there are lots of opportunities in the UK in all of these sectors. So if you want more information, feel free to reach out to me or my colleagues at DIT. Next slide, Ryan. So why do companies succeed in the UK? I mean, I'm just going to give you a couple of points here why businesses are successful in the UK. So the UK has the 5th largest economy in the world. It's a very open country, very business friendly. They've got the 4th largest stock exchange in the world, the London Stock Exchange. And over the years, the UK has been #1 for FDI in Europe. So there are lots of opportunities for foreign investment in the UK. The tax rate is very low. Right now, it's at 19%, and there are plans to slash down the corporate tax rate to 17%. So the grants, the incentives, the cost of doing business it's low. There's also a highly skilled workforce. So 4 of the top 10 top universities in the world are in the UK. The rest of the 6 are in the States. So in terms of talent, there's lots of opportunities for you to, get better talent in the UK. And the UK also has a very rich heritage in terms of innovation. The Industrial Revolution started in England, and since then the UK has had a very rich heritage in terms of, innovation. And there's also robust infrastructure, strong diplomacy and influence, and the UK government has also laid out its grand challenges in terms of its, industrial strategy. So the government is very focused on AI, agent society, especially when you look at the recent crisis, the COVID-19 crisis. There's a lot of opportunity for tech startups, involved in agent society. And there's also focus on clean growth and mobility. So there are lots of opportunities for Canadian startups to benefit from the business environment in the UK. Next slide, Ryan. So how does DIT support businesses? So we have a whole range of programs. So we help you in incorporation, help you with how to figure out your business structure, company registration, opening a business bank account. We do have banking specialists, so we can help you with that. Tax registration, intellectual property. We can also help you to set up an office or a facility. We can help you in terms of site selection. We can also do a cost comparison. If you're thinking about different regions in the UK, we can do a cost comparison for you. And also there's a bunch of financial incentives that are available. We work with local enterprise partners, so we can help you identify some of those financial incentives. And also, in light of COVID-19, many companies are thinking about soft landing. So we can also help you to identify virtual office opportunities if you don't want to set up immediately. We can also do property search and visits. So we can also help you with staffing, immigration and visas. We can provide you information about that, recruitment, work contracts, government training programs, and personnel transfer. And we can also support you in terms of key resources. We can connect you with service providers, R&D experts and sector specialists. We can connect you with universities and excellence centers. And there's also a whole bunch of clusters and associations in the UK that we can connect you with. And there's also government funding. So it's not just DIT. We work with other partners in government, such as BASE, so we can connect you with relevant government officials. Thank you, and over to you, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Raymond, for that. My name is Michael Barton, and I'm here to talk a little bit about Northern Ireland and the role it plays as a region within the UK. I work for an organisation, Invest Northern Ireland. We're going to discuss a little bit around the digital infrastructure in Northern Ireland. Us as an organisation, our goal is to improve the economy. We do that through business development, focusing on innovation, exporting, inward investment, and research and development. And Northern Ireland's got a really strong digital innovation cluster focused around the major universities, which is Queen's University Belfast and Ulster University. Our digital ecosystem in Northern Ireland, which is a region of about 1.8 million people, is made up of about 1,200 businesses, which includes local businesses and also some investors. Can you go on to the next slide there, please, Ryan? Thank you. So Northern Ireland, what does it have to offer? We're really, really lucky in Northern Ireland that we've got an incredibly well-educated young population. It's incredibly well connected. It's very cost effective, and it's got a fantastic track record. With regards to education, Northern Ireland continuously performs above the UK average in terms of computing A levels. It also has 2 world-class universities, which I've touched upon. Queen's University is on the Russell list as well. And then in terms of connectivity, 100% broadband coverage in terms of one of the first regions in Europe to reach that. And also very good telecoms link as well due to the geography between Northern Ireland, Europe, and North America. In terms of operating costs, Northern Ireland is substantially cheaper because of cost of living, about 30% cheaper than other locations regarding the UK and Europe for commercial real estate. And in terms of rental, if you compare it to places like Dublin, which is 90 minutes down the road, it's about 50% cheaper in terms of some residential rental. You can go on to the next slide there, please, Ryan. The digital landscape in Northern Ireland, very much like the global trends of where we're trying to focus, really looking at innovation, collaboration, research and development. And what really works well in Northern Ireland, because of the size of the region, is the partnerships that emerge between businesses, academia. Areas of focus at the moment between universities, industry and government are around things like aging population, health and well-being. There's a focus on smart cities, the digital native, automation and globalization. The automation is particularly key to Northern Ireland as it has a very robust aerospace supply chain. And we're seeing more and more technology being applied to supply chains. You can move on to the next slide, please. Just want to give you a bit of an overview of the digital talent landscape in Northern Ireland. As I mentioned, very, very lucky to have a highly educated young population coming out of schools, but then they go on to further education. Northern Ireland's capital city, Belfast, has also got some serious sort of international recognition of late as well, in terms of being ranked as one of the best cities in the UK to work for in technology and to work as a software developer. It also recently became ranked 9th overall in the top 25 tech cities of the future report. And it was the 2nd city in the UK, with only London ahead of it, which again really shows the promise of the region, and it's now being recognized across the board. You can move on to the next slide, please. In terms of our organization as the Economic Development Agency, we provide a number of things. We really will try and become your partner if you are a Canadian organization looking to come into Northern Ireland. We do that through providing you channels to the necessary support and advice. We try and organize assistance, and that also includes financial assistance around things like cash grants for capital investment and also employment. We work very closely with our Department of Economy and Department of Education as well in terms of things like skills. International reach as well. We, like DIT and my colleague Raymond, we have a vast global network. And when you become an investor into Northern Ireland, you can take advantage of that global network, which includes people like myself here in Canada, but also our offices across the Americas, across the world, in Asia, in Australia, in the Middle East, and across Europe. We're a very strong region in terms of competitive costs and advanced infrastructure as well, which we also try and highlight to any incoming investors. You can move on to the next slide, please. Let's give you an example of, Northern Ireland's sort of position in terms of financial services technology. And I think the reason why Northern Ireland has been so successful is obviously going back towards things like talents, but it's also its proximity to London, its proximity to Dublin, and its proximity to Europe as well. And Belfast is, as I said, about 90 minutes down the road from Dublin, which is obviously a leading city in terms of the EU, but it's only a 45-minute flight into the city of London as well, and it's significantly cheaper to be based in Belfast, where you can also access high quality talent if you're working on things like technology. So it's a really good jumping off point between the UK and the European Union as well. You can move on to the next slide, please. Northern Ireland as well, very similar to our friends in Wales, has really become a leading location for US cybersecurity firms over the past, I would say, decade. A lot of that has been linked to the work that Queen's University has done and the Centre of Secure Information Technology, which is housed at Queen's. But you can see here a lot of very big names from the US have come into Northern Ireland. And even over COVID-19, we had a recent announcement of a US cybersecurity company, Sigilant, who've come in and set up a secure operations centre in Northern Ireland as well. Some good names there you'll probably recognize. In terms of other FDI, you can see here some names are in software development. And again, that harps back to where we can see the focus and the growth over the past 10, 5, 2.5 years, and some really big names coming in. Some good examples of both US companies, but also we're seeing companies from mainland GB and also the Republic of Ireland now coming into Northern Ireland because of its strategic position and where it may end up post December 31. You can move on to the final slide, please. I just want to give you a quick sort of overview of a very established investor, Allstate, who I'm sure you're all very familiar with. All the work they do in Northern Ireland goes back towards the US and Canada. None of the work they do is actually UK based, but they've grown their presence and now are one of our largest IT companies with over 2,200 employees across 3 sites: Belfast, the capital city, Derry, London Derry in the northwest, and also Strabane. They've developed a major centre for innovation, software development, and they've also partnered with Ulster University in Derry and developed work there with the computer science faculty. So again, it's Northern Ireland, a small region, but because of the size, you're able then to connect into things like academia, connect into industry, and connect into government as well. I just thought that was a really good quote from Suren Gupta, who's the technology and ops executive at Allstate, who said every time they open the doors to work every day in Northern Ireland, they save $500,000. And that's something they don't take lightly. So you've got great quality workforce, great quality of life, and you're very close to a London, very close to a Dublin, very close to the European Union, and you're also not that far away in terms of getting to Canada. It's about a 5.5, 6 hour flight. So that's going to wrap it up. I'm delighted to be here today. I want to thank Communitech for the guys for having us, my colleague Raymond from DIT, and I look forward to hopefully connecting with a few of you on LinkedIn and beyond and answering any of your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Michael, and to Raymond. My name is Azar Janjua. I am the head of Communitech Outposts. And thanks a lot to the rest of you in the audience for attending the session and letting us talk to you about the UK and the various ways that we can all help in that process of setting up in the UK. Now, from my end, I'm with Communitech, and Communitech, our simple mandate is to help Canadian companies start, scale, grow, and succeed. And we are constantly looking at new ways to help organizations of all shapes and sizes. Now, we created the Outpost program initially to help companies scale quickly during a powerful economy. But as the world has changed so drastically, Communitech Outpost has become even more important to help companies hire and manage remote employees around the world. The UK has always been a great natural trading partner for Canada. Our joint history runs deep and continues to. The UK is an incredibly convenient English-speaking launchpad for any company to start their European operations. And despite being a small country in size, the UK economic engine really does stand out on its own. One great story I heard recently is that in April, even though the coronavirus clusters were rampant in Italy and Spain and France and throughout continental Europe, the UK supply chain was able to hold strong and stay relatively unaffected because they'd already spent the last few years in preparation for Brexit. So the UK is gradually, making itself less reliant on continental Europe, which actually worked out to be a great benefit to keep foods and goods on the shelf during the pandemic. Now, the genesis for Communitech Outposts comes from Communitech's chair, Dave Caputo, who himself is a serial entrepreneur. When he was scaling one of his early companies, Pickstream internationally, one of his major investors, Newbridge, was able to save Pickstream the headache involved with building their own network of subsidiaries. The investor used its global network to hire talent and manage payroll for Pickstream employees. So basically, Pickstream employees were housed with Newbridge, and Newbridge handled the payroll, handled the contributions, and then billed Pickstream back for the help. Now, when Dave sold that company and launched and scaled his next company, Sandvine, they did not have access to that global network, which meant they faced enormous challenges with respect to time and capital as they tried to hire outside of Canada. So with this experience in mind, Dave came to Communitech and said, okay, guys, solve this problem. He wanted us to help reduce barriers, costs, and red tape for Canadian companies like his as they expand globally. So from there, Communitech Outposts was born. Now, who are we looking to help? We want to help companies that are looking globally to hire talent and hire the best talent to either develop their product, manage their customers, or engage prospects. Business travel is not what it used to be. Right now, borders continue to be on lockdown, and even when flights do become possible, airlines will carry reduced loads, making it much more expensive to fly. Will you want to get on a plane with that? Will you want to get on a plane for that conference or trade show? Will it be worth the increased cost and possible health risk? So companies have been telling us that it's far more beneficial for an employee to manage a customer base if they're within driving distance. Likewise, there's incredible value in building a remote team of R&D talent from around the world. And obviously from the UK, you're only a short train ride away from Paris or from Brussels, and you can manage customers or manage talent without even having to get on a plane. So in any case, great talent is everywhere, and that's where we come in. Communitech Outposts exists to help you quickly get boots on the ground in the places you need them most. Now, a primary barrier to quick entry is the fact that it's expensive and time-consuming for finance teams to just spin up foreign companies and manage them on an ongoing basis, especially if the business only needs 2 or 3 people to really build out the region. Plus, it's incredibly difficult to secure or renew health benefits for small groups. Now, I've personally spent most of my own career in international business. Getting boots on the ground might seem easy, but I'll tell you from personal experience, there are a variety of legal, tax, and regulatory considerations. So similarly to how Pickstream used their global investors network, Communitech Outposts offers you access to our network of subsidiaries, which we will use to hire and then compliantly house your international employees, which we then assign back to you. We act as the employer of record in the background and take on the burden of payroll and statutory filings. And then along with that, we've worked hard to negotiate with top carriers to be able to offer health benefit packages to employees. So when you want to hire people outside of Canada, there's a few ways to do it. You can hire some lawyers and accountants and set up a subsidiary, open a bank account, set up the state registrations, find a benefit provider, draft employment contracts and handbooks, and suddenly 6 or 8 or 9 months are going to go by. Now, some companies choose the contractor model, but in my experience, employees like to be employees. They don't want to be responsible for handling their own remittances and creating their own companies and remitting their own contributions. During a routine audit, federal and provincial tax authorities in Canada and in the UK will review all the contractor agreements and practices to confirm whether these individuals are truly contractors or if they look and feel more like an actual employee. And then if the company is found in violation, there are hefty fines and penalties imposed. But that's not the only risk. If a company is looking to raise capital or to be acquired, simply having contractors on the books can reduce a company's valuation. So ultimately, contractors might save money in a short term, but it can become very expensive very fast. So with Outpost, this is a non-issue because your employees will be employed locally within a UK company on a UK compliant employment agreement, and everything will be handled. Now, starting in the UK for us was a natural fit for Communitech Outposts. Prospect is an organization that collects data and does a lot of great data analysis in the HR space. And they recently released a startup talent report where they looked at they aggregated surveys and job boards and HR databases from across Canada between January and April. And they looked at the US and the UK as the top 2 countries where Canadian companies are growing and continuing to hire talent, especially to help with sales. They're looking for software engineers, looking for customer service and operations. So we're confident that Communitech Outposts has launched right in time to take businesses to the next level, international. So I'll end my presentation with that. And if you have any other questions, please reach out to outposts@communitech.ca or the Communitech website, and we can talk more. Thanks, Ryan.
Awesome. So thank you so much to Raymond, Michael, and Azar for those presentations. I got a lot out of them, and I'm hoping you did as well. So just a reminder to connect with them on LinkedIn should you be interested in keeping in touch or have any questions. And also keep an eye out for our follow-up email with contact information and more material. Now, switching gears, in November of last year, our friends at Mars, they published an incredible resource for Canadian companies looking to expand globally, specifically in the UK. So this is a 20-page UK guide, and it explores the opportunities that make the UK an attractive destination. It explores the challenge of competition in the UK market, as well as the consequences of Brexit on trade, talent, and the economy. It's also important to note that the report was written before Brexit was finalized. But the guide also concludes with a UK market evaluation canvas. This guides senior leaders through a series of questions which helps them evaluate whether the UK is the right country for their company. So feel free to go to app.marsdd.com/international to sign up, and you can receive a free copy. So next we have our 3 CEOs that have successfully expanded their business into the UK. So today here with us to discuss each of their journeys and the lessons they learned along the way are Lisa Grogan, CEO of Overlap Associates, Jason Cassidy, who's CEO of Shiny Docs, and Ben Sainsbury, a CEO of Marion Surgical. I don't have a fireplace with me. This is a virtual session. It's unfortunate, but with that, I'll hand it over to Lisa to kick off the presentation. Lisa?
Great, thanks, Ryan. And I think the 3 of us are very happy to be here and just to share super informally about our personal experience about expanding and setting up in the UK. And Azar, coming off your presentation is interesting because we established our UK presence in 2018 when Outpost wasn't around. And I can tell you, when you put that grid up, we have lived through some of that, of doing it on our own. And I think Outpost would have saved us some stress along the way. But I think we'll just dive in. We've got 3 very different businesses and 3 very different stories for why the UK for us. And Jason, I might just kick over to you to get us started for why Shiny Docs in the UK, and maybe you can just give a quick overview of your company and then tell us a little bit more about why.
Yeah, certainly. So we're founded in this area in Waterloo region 6 years ago with a team of people who had worked together at various companies and consulting together previously, and pivoted as a product company selling worldwide almost immediately. This is in the enterprise content management space. Think additive solutions to like your Microsoft SharePoints, OpenText content suites, and then in place on file shares. So that's enough about the company itself, but we want to talk about, we had international success very early on selling into the UK, also other places, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Australia. And as we were expanding into these areas from a sales perspective, operating remotely, it became really apparent that we needed to have some in time zone presence, in culture presence, in order to leverage the success that we had early. And we actually made a mistake early in this process, and we hired sales in Germany, thinking, well, we already know English and we're culturally compatible with the United Kingdom, so let's hire in Germany because that's less us, if you know what I mean. And we found that it was a little suboptimal in that it worked fine with selling into the places where we already had success, the Austria, Switzerland, that type of thing. But there were some cultural barriers. It was difficult for us to manage accounts in France and other places selling out of that. And so we parted ways with that and backed up and kind of rebooted the conversation, looking to land in the United Kingdom because of a number of things. It was geographically, it was fairly easy to get there. And obviously the cultural the ability to speak English, and we shared practically everything else culturally as well. And it was such a good jumping off point. We found that somebody from the United Kingdom, from a sales perspective, could sell to anywhere in the world. So we kind of had that geographic thing, and there didn't seem to be the political barriers as well. So it was great for us. We had just started the hiring process when we were approached by Communitech saying, hey, you guys should be part of this outpost program. And the timing was just beautiful. So we had already issued a offer to an individual starting in a sales capacity, and Communitech was massively accommodating for us in that we blended the offer and the arrangement that we already had with this employee. They licensed the Shiny Docs name. They took on a lot of liability. Not that we're not willing to be back to back with them, but these things are more complicated than that. In that it's truly, Communitech is investing in our success here. Why else would they take on this risk associated with the employees? So we're truly grateful for that. So I could go on and on. I don't want to monopolize the time, but that's the backstory of how we got there, and we've been selling successfully with a nice launch pad in the UK since last November.
That's great, Jason. And I mean, that's what you hear. Like some people, really basing their sales folks because that the UK is a gateway for Europe. And I think that that's an interesting approach. Whereas Ben, you have a different story and you have a different reason for why Marion Surgical is in the UK, which I think is really interesting. Maybe you can share your story of what your company is and why UK.
Yeah, sure. So we have a virtual reality surgical simulator currently for urologists to train on urology procedures. And so most of our sales so far have been in the US. And then last May or April of last year, a gentleman came over from Midas, which is a group in Manchester, to talk about how Manchester was a sort of a hack to get into the NHS, that they had a lot of resources to get your technology into the NHS, which is a market we really wanted to get into as a gateway to Europe, etc. So I did some research. It looked pretty good. So I took a trip over there. I went to Media City, which is up in Manchester. It's a new kind of up and coming area for tech. The BBC's moved there, etc. I ended up thinking that it was a good fit. They set up a bunch of meetings for me, and I ended up applying for some funding in the UK under an umbrella company, a UK subsidiary that I set up, and I got the funding. So that was from Innovate UK, which is one of the big funding sources in the UK. So that was about equivalent about 500,000 Canadian. So I then went and accelerated, opening an office over there, and hired some people. And I've just come back recently this month. So I was out there for about 6 months, setting things up, and it was really really interesting experience. And really good for the company. And now I have some pilots going at the NHS. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, that Innovate funding is big, and I think it's interesting that you found that opportunity for yourself. I'll say for Overlap, we're a boutique strategy firm. We practice human-centered design, and we've been based in Kitchener since 2011, and we work all over Canada. We have a number of marquee clients out of the States, but in our experience over the last few years, UNICEF Global has been a key partner of ours. And so over the years, we've sent our teams out into the world to far-flung places like Jakarta and Jordan and Geneva, and we used to be in New York all the time. And I think for us, there was a growing confidence that what we do we can do, in different countries. And probably a number of years ago, if someone had said, where's Overlap's second office going to be? I probably would have said Calgary or maybe Vancouver. But I think the UNICEF experience, for a professional services firm really opened our eyes to, we can go out in the world and do this. And so our UK expansion, for me, I went to a global affairs workshop. I can't even remember how I got invited, but I went to this workshop, and the advice was, especially for professional services, Canadian companies do well in Commonwealth countries? And are there any Commonwealth countries where you have some market intelligence and some connections? And I actually had lived in the UK from 2000 to 2008, married to a Yorkshireman, and worked over there as communications director of a big national museum. And so the penny sort of started to drop for me that the UK, not just do I love it over there, but actually it could also be an interesting business opportunity. And so for us, I started going over, you do the trips over, you're starting to explore, would what we do be able to enhance things that are happening over there? And so we took a roll of the dice and decided, let's go for it. We think that there can be opportunity. We based ourselves in Leeds, again, a market that I know very well, very similar in size and feel to Kitchener-Waterloo. Being in a mid-market is interesting. In London, we would get lost in the shuffle, whereas being in a mid-market was really good for us. So yeah, it's our story of why is a little bit more personal in nature, but it's made sense. And so I think, these are good stories. And I think, Ben, maybe I'll flip it back to you. What is something that you've been most happy about in terms of this, in terms of your expansion? You could say the funding piece, but in terms of your experience over the last, 8-9 months, what's something that you found that you've been really pleased with in terms of your setup that you would advise others to maybe follow?
I'm finding that people really kind of help each other in the Northwest. So there's a lot of, I was just saying I'm a little bit tired because I was in a program that Barclays in Cambridge put together, and it started at 3 this morning and 3 yesterday morning, the last days of a session of how to pivot your business during COVID. I'm in another one with Creative England. There's just a lot of support groups for startups, and I find a lot of the other companies that I've met have really wanted to help, which is kind of our other offices in Autodesk in Toronto, and I find it's a little more competitive in Toronto in the space, whereas in the northwest of England, people seem to want to share resources and stuff.
I agree with that, being in the same area. Jason, there's a couple questions coming through on the chat. I'm going to throw one to you because I think you found this. How did you choose and find your UK hire, your salesperson that you've got, your jack of all trades salesperson that you've got in place? How did that happen?
Yeah, it is of course, there's traditional ways that you could approach it with recruiters and other things, but for us, it was a triangulation effort between the fact that we had existing customers there already helped a lot in that the customers themselves had a good understanding of the landscape of how they shopped around and they found us. We had reseller partners that were in the area as well, and just tapping through that network, you keep asking all the time, and we were asking for years, just saying, hey, who's available and who would you recommend? And through that network, a few names came out, and it allowed us to go through and identify a number of individuals who had some background at previous companies that were interesting to us, some already a hit list of companies that they've sold to. So yeah, that early success that we had from a sales perspective, oddly enough, helped us find our sales capacity while we were there. So we didn't really have to tap into recruiters and that type of thing. And the comfort level associated with hiring through referrals for those first employees is massive, because it's pass or fail. If they fail, then you're not going to expand. So it must succeed, and that's why I love the comfort associated with kind of multiple recommendations from different directions.
I agree entirely, and I think for all of us, hiring anyone running a company, your people are your most important thing, and one bad apple can spoil a bunch. And I think this is our baby. This is your company, your reputation. I know for us, we did double down on that associates model that we used in our early days of overlap. And I was lucky enough to, bring people. We've got 3 associates, 2 of whom I have worked with, and I worked with in 2000. And so we know each other so well. There's just a back and forth, and it works really well. But again, digging deep into long-term relationships. One of the other questions here, and Ben, maybe I'll throw it over to you, is how are Marion Surgical, and then Jason, maybe you can comment on Shiny Docs, how are you building sales from UK customers?
Sure. So again, we're trying to tackle the NHS. And so we have some, because we're a medical training tool, we've had some validations from, US hospitals and Canadian hospitals, but the UK seems to do things their own way, and they want their own validation. So the key is to kind of break into these different sort of silos of NHS. They have different, what are they called? Groups, or they're called clusters. And so we're breaking into the Northwest, and then once we kind of establish ourselves there, we're going to then use that success to move to another NHS location. So that's kind of how we're doing it that way, is kind of getting regional success and then translating that success into other areas of the NHS.
And yes, there's NHS trusts. I mean, there's
trust. That's it. Trusts.
Yeah. So it's interesting because our flagship, we've won a number of contracts there, but our flagship one is with an NHS, and we're coming to the end of our delivery, and it's gone so well. It's gone incredibly well. And once we have this as a case study, not only will we be able to expand this client, but to your point, we're working with this NHS here, we can just go next door to this NHS here and just start to expand in that way. Jason, do you want to comment on expanding your UK customer base?
Yeah, certainly. Some of the fundamentals of selling is nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd, and so the ability to leverage what large amount or what little bit of sales that you have in an area is massively important. And for us, having local representation allows us to expand and even to experiment within the deals that we already have in place. Like 2 years ago, we expanded out of the traditional enterprise content management that people are familiar with using SharePoints and OpenText and other things, into the areas of auto recognition of content and using artificial intelligence to recognize and find the information for you and do a lot of that work. And nobody likes to go first with anything, especially with the type of customer that we have. We have governments and municipalities, nuclear power plants and auto manufacturers and those types of things. And without references, you're dead. And how do you sell something that's never been done before without references? So having customers already doing this type of enterprise content management work in the region, being able to say, hey, for a little amount of money or in exchange for a press release, would you allow us to do this additional work with you? And of course, people are going to say yes. They want to be seen as being innovative. So it allowed to kind of snowball, build through referrals, and then it turns from nobody wants to go first into a fear of missing out, being able to show, okay, well, this is happening over at this city council. Maybe you should be doing it as well. And it can't happen without those initial, it can't happen without that initial success. And maybe the initial success can't happen without the right people in place. So it all kind of fits together from those first little seeds that we planted.
Yeah, it's interesting with our NHS. we had met with the team about 4 or 5 times before the tender went out and before the tender was written. So there was a relationship. And so then by the time it was a competitive process, I mean, everything over there is stringent and it was a competitive process, but the Canadian aspect for us was a real plus. And they just said, you know, in the feedback after we won the work, they said out of all the proposals, you know, no, ours was genuinely new. It was a genuinely new approach and they were excited about that. But again, they're still nervous. Like we were unproven, you know, we had done a number of small projects, but this was a fairly large project. So, you know, again, you know, they have to kind of be a bit brave, and that's like any startup. I think, you know, with that in mind, you know, you sort of think about unforeseen challenges, and, you know, maybe COVID to one side, but Ben or Jason, are there any unforeseen challenges as part of your experience going into the UK that you would highlight for others?
I'll hop in just super quickly, and I'm not going to say it's an unforeseen challenge, but it's just one of those situations where we came into this just, hey, we want to sell, we want to provide value, and we want to have wins with customers that are compatible with our software and compatible with us culturally and all those types of things. And there's this balance of, I love the fact that Outposts allows us to not worry or care too much about how we're implementing things that in the UK, we're just selling there and doing all right. But at the same time, we still have to invest in understanding the region. We still have to invest in understanding the differences and how to sell in the area. So that's the balance for us. Is I have to say it's been from the all those slippery parts that Azra was talking about earlier, how they're making our lives easier, doesn't mean we can just parade around and go sell and have such an easy time. We still have to culturally come in and show why Shiny Docs is meaningful in the region, how we understand the customers and that type of thing. And I'm not going to say it was a challenge, but it's just we have to remind ourselves of that constantly, because the other commercial side of it and all the other those statutory sides are all looked after, and we can just focus on the selling.
Ben?
Yeah, so there are a couple things. One of them is the government is very slow, so getting VAT registration and getting, you know, a bunch of things done is very slow. And I had my wife and kids come over for the last few months, and getting their visa was very challenging. We didn't use a lawyer the first time and we were unsuccessful, and then we got it, but the whole process was very frustrating. And, you know, a lot of English people say that's just the kind of way it is, but I wish I had known that. But then on the other hand, I saw the note about finding my first hire. We used a recruiter who's been great. And then the recruiter had something which was interesting, is they have payment terms. So the grant that we're on pays in arrears. So the recruiter doesn't, like, basically I pay their finance department and they give me terms of, you know, net 30. So I'm able to kind of manage the cash flow. I haven't seen that in Canada before, where the recruiter's actually taking on the payroll function and basically bankrolling the employees, which was pretty good.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of different things that's just done differently.
Yeah.
You think it's very close to Canada, but then it's not quite.
I think especially, you know, since the crash, and in the UK, it was felt so heavily, the changes, the regulations that have been set in place. It took us 3 months to open our corporate bank account. So again, if Outposts, if you can get around that with Outposts and you don't necessarily need a bank account right in the UK, that's good. But, you know, just even today, I've been back and forth with our employment lawyer and we're relooking at our agreements. But again, for them to do it, like, they have to do all this background check and I have to send all this documentation just for them to be able to say yes. And so I have found things just take longer, and it is just, and I lived there for 8 years and I loved it. And I sort of have forgotten that things take longer. And I think for me also in the sales, like I don't know about you guys, but the, you know, sort of the cadence of sales over here, we sort of know, yeah, this meeting, and then we're probably contracting. in England, I have found in my area of business, which is professional services, I'm having 6, 7, 8 meetings, and I'm hearing like, great, this is really exciting. Let's meet in 2 months. And it's like, oh, just, are we going ahead or what? So I sort of have to remember that. I don't know, Jason in sales, or Jason and Ben, thinking about that sales process, whether you found, just a different timeline.
Yeah, compared to North America, I've definitely found that, yeah, there doesn't seem to be the sense of urgency to act, especially among government customers. Mind you, government's pretty slow here, and no offense to anybody who's a government purchaser here, but it is, we do find that there's a lot of lurkers, and eventually you sell to them. Like, there might be somebody who attends your webinars for 3 years in a row, and then you finally get the purchase order, and you're like, okay, you look back and there's no HubSpot or Salesforce or anything that can tell you the trigger event. And so there is some complexity there. I haven't really thought too hard about it. Luckily, it's not costing us so much that it's a big issue. It's just kind of an interesting thing that we've noticed, that there are lots of lurkers prior to a purchase.
Yeah, it's interesting. Luckily, my CFO, he describes it as not a costly experiment, right? And so, this year the plan, Overlap made the investment, and this year it needs to wash its own face, as it were, and then we start to see. But we're based at Nexus, which is like being based at Communitech. We pay for on a monthly basis, so we've kept our costs really lean. And it's this experimental time. Someone has asked the question about our team in place and what kind of contact touch points we have with our UK team. And Ben, I know you've just returned from being full-time over there. What's your plan going forward in terms of how you're providing support?
Well, when I was over there, the COVID thing happened, so it's pretty much the same, except it's earlier in the day. But I'm still doing everything through Zoom and through Google Hangouts and all that kind of stuff. So that hasn't really changed. So all my employees are virtual anyway. So.
Yeah. Jason, what about you? You have an interest?
Yeah, we had an original plan to quarterly bring staff over here, and that's what we were doing until, of course, the COVID hit. And because it's a sales capacity that's there, I think a lot of people know the day-to-day how difficult it is to do sales. Like, somebody who really wants your product, you might email them and you never hear back from them for weeks, and that's normal. You have to feel good about that. And so with salespeople specifically, I think it's daily contact for us. Sometimes it's just 5 or 10 minutes, just doing a catch up, offering up support. And because it can be a pretty lonely experience if you send out the feelers or try to close something and you don't hear back from anybody for a week. That's normal. So they should be hearing from us all the time, and we keep those daily touch points, which I think helps a lot.
I agree. It's interesting because for me, our UK, it feels like our little startup, right? And it's our little maverick. Like, we've got processes and things in place at Overlap, and the way things do, the way the team interacts with stuff. But out there, it's kind of fun for me. I like it because it's kind of startup-y, and when I go over, it's pounding the pavement. It's breakfast meetings through to evening meetings at the pub, and it's using my time really well. So it kind of reminds me of our early days. And I think just looking at the time, one question I wanted to ask you all, if there's one thing that you know now that you wish you knew then, what would it be? And or what do you wish you'd have done differently? Which is another question that came through on the chat.
Go ahead, Ben.
Well, for me, it's like, I didn't realize that getting the Innovate funding that I got was like winning the lotto, because a lot of UK companies try, year after year and don't get it. So I feel pretty blessed that happened to us. I guess it was the right time at the right place, and the right people read it. And now we're in the process of, in discussions with various VCs. So the one thing that I would have done differently is, early on, I kind of had a guy who was kind of pounding the pavement, looking for funders over there, and it turned out to not have worked out. And so his contract was pretty aggressive. So I sort of regret doing that, because he basically just used government resources over there and charged me for it. And now he wants a success fee. So that was a bit nerve wracking. So I think I didn't realize how, when I got to the UK, how many resources would be available and that I wouldn't have needed that particular service. But other than that, I'm pretty happy.
That's great, Ben. Jason?
Yeah, we're early enough in the process to say that like there wasn't this key learning that I wish I could go back and wave a magic wand. But I will say that I know now what I should have asked a few things before, and it's not really about what ask, because we're happy with the staff, we're happy with performance. All of that is quite good, and obviously we're expanding our operations there, sales at least, and we're happy with that. But it's just our model and our expectations now. We know what to expect, and when we go into the next region, we'll have a much better understanding of how we want to proceed, and I think we'll hit the ground a little bit faster. But it's just it's not about doing anything differently. It's just about understanding what your expectations should be and how you can perform, less than, man, I wish I would have done this contract different, or I wish I wouldn't have done that. There's I can't really think of anything that I wouldn't do or I should have done. I just wish I knew everything that I know now back then.
Yeah, and maybe I'll close on, when I think about that, I think it's the word patience comes to mind. For me, our work is so relationship focused, and I think, I've really worked hard to build relationships. And actually, in a time of COVID, like, we're contracting a load of stuff, and because I've built up that relationship. But I think I have felt like it's taken longer to get to this point than I would have thought going into it. But I think any kind of expansion, especially the first time, that's just how it's going to go. And so I would probably tell myself, just have a little bit more patience, and it's going to take some time and energy, and it's going to be all right. So, Ryan, over to you.
Yes, and with that, I do believe we're out of time. Lots of great learnings there. I wanted to pause, take a moment, truly thank each and every one of you, our speakers throughout the session today, for your time, and of course your wise words. So if you're watching and you have any questions for them or want to connect, feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn, as we mentioned before. And also thank you for attending, or if you made it this far on the on-demand recorded version of today's session, thank you as well. There will be a follow-up email with additional details and contact info, but in the meantime, reach out to anyone at Communitech and we can help you out. Once again, we hope you'll join us for our next Ask Me Anything session, which will be July 7th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, it'll be all about pandemic-proof pitching. So thanks again to everyone, and take care.